In this video, we will begin adding the CSS rules for making our web page look more multi-column like our mockup. That's because right now, everything is the default. And as block elements, they are taking up the entire width of their container, which is header, which is inside body. Before I get started with that though, you might have noticed in the previous video that there are some background noises. You might hear some birds chirping, or maybe a dog barking, or maybe somebody working on their yard with their lawnmower or whatever. Well, that's because I am working from home and I have my windows open right now because the weather is nice. And as a result, you can kind of hear everything. So that's kind of what's going on. So if you hear stuff going on, that's the deal. I don't have like a sound studio or anything fancy like that. All right, so let's go to our style sheet now, and we will begin adding the different CSS rules for making our website more multi-column. Let's start with a comment. We'll call this one grid system. This is the CSS portion, so we are using the / and an asterisk as the opening delimiter, and then the closing delimiter is an asterisk and a /. And we'll start by defining how wide each column is, and we'll create a class for that. We'll say dot for class dot col-1 as a class name. This is something that I am making up, something that makes sense to me as the developer of this web page. And for me, .col-1 is short for column 1, and this is where I'm indicating how wide I want a particular column to be. Our mockup has 12 columns, and the entire width would be 100%. If we divide 100% by 12 for each column, you're going to see that each column is 8.33%. And that's what we'll say here then. The width, when it's one column, is 8.33%. Now I'm just going to create one for each possibility. So if something was 2 columns wide, it's wide right here, that will be 8.33 times 2, which is 16.66%. And if something is 3 columns wide, it's going to be 25%. If something is 4 columns wide, then it will be 33.33%. If it's 5 columns wide, it's 41.66%. 6 columns wide is 50%. 7 columns wide is 58.33%. 8 columns wide is 66.66%. Something 9 columns wide will take up 75% of the container. Almost there. 10 columns is 83.33%. Eleven columns is 91.66%. And finally, 12 columns is 100%. So depending on how many columns your design is, that will determine how wide and how many different selectors you need to create. In my case, 100% divided into 12 makes it to where each column is 8.33. And as you are creating these different CSS rules, just make sure that you pay attention to the syntax. Don't forget your unique class selector names from .col-1 all the way to .col-12. Don't forget your opening and closing curly brackets, and then inside each one, a complete declaration with the width and a colon, and then the value followed by a semicolon. If you make any kind of syntax errors here, you might have some unexpected results in your page preview later on. All right, so that's the first portion to creating our CSS so that we can start having a multi-column layout. We've set up the width. Now we need to make them float. And I'll talk more about float later on in another video, probably not under lab 3, but lab 4 maybe. But for now, I'm just introducing you to the whole concept. When you make something float, you have two possibilities. You can make it float left, or you can make it float right. When you make something float left, then elements will float side by side as long as the container can handle the elements be sitting side by side. Let's do something like this. The square bracket there, class, an asterisk, equals, and then inside double quotes, we'll say COL dash. And the closing bracket there, and then I'll do my opening and closing curly brackets just like any other selector. Now this selector, if you look at it, we're telling the web browser to look for any class selector, and we're telling it to look for any class selector because we said class, and then there's the asterisk, which is kind of like a wild card, and we're saying to search for anything that's a class that has the letters COL dash, and that happens to correspond with all these different selectors that we just created. And using something like this makes it a lot easier to target a whole bunch of selectors instead of having to write out for each one the float property. This will save us from having to say float left, float left, and so on for each one of those. Let me undo those. Instead, you can use this, say, make anything that has this class applied to it, make it float to the left so that they can be side by side. Okay, let's save that. And now that we have this CSS portion set up, now we can determine the correct column class selector to apply to the containers for each one of these columns. We'll start with Ragus Photography. Ragus Photography, looking at my grid system here, you can think of it as being 5 columns wide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Based on our naming system here, something that's 5 columns wide, we'll need a class selector of col-5. We will hook this column 5 selector to this div using a class attribute with the value of col-5. Now we are hooking this property that will make this div only 41.66%. Right now, this div is 100% of the width, but now it's just going to be 41.66%. And then we're going to make the other ones shorter, and then with the float property, they can sit side by side. Let's go back here. For the nav, you can think of that as being 6 columns wide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we will apply or hook this col-6 class selector to nav because it's 6 columns wide. And then finally, for the last div with the social media icon, that is only 1 column wide. So we will apply col-1 to that. And now when you add 5 plus 6 plus 1, that is 12. And now I'm covering the entire width because it's 12 columns wide in this design. So I will save my HTML file, and I will also save my style.css. And if everything is working out correctly, then I have linked this HTML with the CSS. I have shortened each one of these to correspond with the correct column width, and I'm making them float side by side. So let's refresh our preview and see if this is what we will have happen. And yes, this is what yours should look like now. Let me make my window bigger here and use my inspect element again. Using Chrome, that would be right click and then inspect. And now when I hover over, let me expand that. When I hover over the first div, that is only 41.66% of the entire container. And you can see that also under styles that it's floating to the left and it's 41.66%. The nav, when I hover over that, that is 6 columns wide or 50%. And then the last one is 1 column or 8.33%. Now I have a multi-column layout. Of course, looking at our mock-up, we still have some adjustments to make. In the next video, we'll do just that. We will make Ragus Photography look more like this, to where it's italicized here and then not italicized there. We will make our unordered list to where it is 1 line instead of 5 lines with a bullet point. And we will position the Facebook icon to where it lines up better with the text. And we will also add a background color to the header portion.